That's another thing too about fearful avoidance. If you were, in no contact with a fearful and they're leaning more anxious, that's when you start to see that time frame change. If they have like a fearful main and they have an anxious side that's like a secondary where they get triggered into, then you won't even have to wait 3 to 4 weeks to reach. Hey, what's going on, my beautiful people? This is Certified Life and Relationship Coach, Coach Court. In today's video, we're going to talk about the fearful avoidant and if you should go no contact. Is it a mistake to go no contact with the fearful avoidant? We're going to talk about just that. We're going to talk about that today. I'm going to be answering some of the questions that I have from people and read some of the comments from our viewers who identify as a fearful avoidant. If this is your first time viewing me, do me a favor and subscribe to the channel by clicking that subscribe button and ringing the bell so you're notified for when I do release a new video. Also, if you want my help personally, the quickest way to get into contact with me is through my website at www.fruitfulseeds.com. Let's get to the nitty gritty here. Let's talk about the fearful avoidant. And if you guys are just seeing me for the first time and you're not quite familiar with what the fearful avoidant attachment style is, for me, I have studied this extensively. I have worked with fearful avoidant clients, pretty regularly. And from what I've seen is the fearful avoidants usually have had some type of complex trauma. Don't quote me here. This is just a general rule. This is just from what I've seen, from people I've studied, from the people that I've worked with. They have had, kind of multiple traumas throughout their lives where they're almost like in this perpetual fight or flight mode throughout their whole life, throughout their career, even throughout their relationships. And I have written down some of the things that I've experienced working with them. And from the people that are, part of my community, they are really good at reaching out and letting me know when I'm wrong, which I'm okay with being wrong. I'm okay with not knowing everything. I think it's healthy to find those blind spots and be corrected if you're out here putting out misinformation. Most of the time, though, when I'm talking to people, they are saying, all right, what you're saying is valid. Like, this is my experience. I resonate with a lot of the things that you're saying. So I just wanted to share another fearful avoidant videos because I haven't done a whole lot about it. I talk more about the dismissive avoidant attachment style, but today we're going to talk about this. The first question is, how long should you go no contact with a fearful avoidant? I did a video a couple years ago that said, I told that, that time frame for a fearful avoidant is around that 3 to 4 weeks because their initial response from what I've seen is they get angry about the breakup. They go into this cutoff mode where they just say, they use that anger as a vehicle to prevent them from getting more hurt from the person that they're breaking up with or the person that's breaking up with them. So that 3-4 weeks is kind of a gauge. Around the first 2 weeks, they'll be in that anger. They may delete you from social medias. They may completely block your number, put your number on silent. Throughout that first couple of weeks is when that happens. But then when they start to turn that corner around the 3-4 week mark, they start to think more like, did I over exaggerate the experience? Did I inflate whatever was really happening? Or was this my typical pattern of cutting people off and dismissing them because I felt a certain way in that moment? So this leads to my next question is, what is their experience during the no contact period? And that's exactly what happens is they start to really question a whole lot of things. The fearful avoidant are very good at being in tune with other people. They are pretty much a little bit too in tune. They're hypervigilant. They're always analyzing and reanalyzing things to try to figure out what's the best outcome and if they were the one that actually was the problem. A lot of them do know that they do struggle with relationship issues. They do know that they can be volatile at times when it comes to disagreement and having uncomfortable conversations. They understand that about themselves for the most part. A big question that a lot of people have for me after the breakup is usually, does the fearful avoidant even care about the breakup? And they do. You have to understand that a lot of these things are hardwired inside them to subconsciously get their needs met, which is safety and security. I think for the most part, a lot of insecure attachment has something to do with safety and security. What makes me feel safe? And for them, cutting the person off, going and doing their own thing for a little while may help them get those immediate needs met, which is liberation, a need for something new and exciting in that moment. The next big question that people have for me is the fearful avoidant the most difficult attachment style? And I would say, what is most difficult? You have to really define what difficult means. I think that, all insecure attachments are really hard to deal with and hard to heal for a person that's not self-aware. But the fearful avoidants tend to have the most complex traumas, like I said before, which makes it hard to really kind of dig deep on where exactly their biggest traumas are coming from. And as a coach, I try not to dive too deep into that, but I do like to ask really powerful questions to help them get to the bottom of where some of these responses are coming from. It's important that they actually are doing that work. They're asking these questions of themselves of where's this coming from? How can I heal it? Because if they go back into any other situation and they haven't healed those wounds, they're just going to show up the same exact way and cause the same pattern to go over and over again. A lot of times people are just excited to have that person back into their life because of that push-pull dynamic and that dopamine doses that they get from every time that they get back with that person. But it becomes really unhealthy and really damaging for people who are trying to have that level of consistency in their life that they hope that the fearful avoidant can provide sometime in the future. I'm going to read a comment here from one of my subscribers. She said, as a FA, I can say that I typically mirror a person's actions. Now, this is during the breakup stage of the relationship when you guys have just broken up. I typically mirror the person's actions for the sake of not making a fool of myself. My belief is that you never truly know how a person is feeling unless they tell you, and even if they tell you, they could be lying. So I tend to safeguard myself by allowing others to speak and move first. So she's saying that she basically shows up exactly how the other person is showing up. And like I said before, fearful avoidants are really good at picking up on people's vibes, and they're very intuitive when it comes to where a person's at. And sometimes it can be to their detriment. Sometimes they can read it wrong. And by that time, they've already come up with this narrative that, oh, this person isn't safe. This person isn't someone I can trust. For the person watching this that wrote this comment, try not to wait on them to make the first move. That's a step in becoming more secure yourself. Ask them the questions that you're probably fearful of. And I know that comes from like a fear of rejection. Like you don't want to put yourself out there and be vulnerable because you don't want to, like you said, make a fool of yourself. But that's kind of what love is. That's kind of what relationships should be around, is vulnerability and putting yourself out there because you're not really scared of the response that you get from that person. She goes on to say that I do have a very confident side though. So when I am not attached to anybody or feeling secure in myself, I can make all types of moves. I'm also on a healing journey right now. And this is why when you see a fearful breakup, have a breakup or go through a breakup, they're self-improvement addicts. Like they really go hard on themselves, and they'll go into all the therapies, they take the courses, they'll take the trip across seas that they always wanted to take. That's how they start to heal from breakups. If you know somebody that's a fearful avoidant, I'm sure you've seen that from them also. I'm working with my anxious emotions as when they arise in my body and becoming aware of my dismissive nature. Reiterating and affirming that connection is a beautiful thing. That's another thing too about fearful avoidance. If you were, in no contact with a fearful and they're leaning more anxious, that's when you start to see that time frame change. If they have like a fearful main and they have an anxious side that's like a secondary where they get triggered into, then you won't even have to wait 3 to 4 weeks to reach out, or then it takes them a lot less time to have those feelings bubble back up to the surface. Like that might take a week or two. But if they're more on the avoidance side, that's when you'll see that 4 or 5 week mark become more applicable to that situation, where their secondary is that dismissiveness where they start to pull away and they need more time. They need more space. And that space and time helps them process things a little bit better. The next question that I have is, why do you emphasize necessity of FaceTime Zoom? So one of the videos that I did is I think it was another no contact video for fearful avoidance, and I talked about when you do get back in touch with them, let's say around that 2-3 week mark, you want to see where they're at, test the waters, kind of gauge the temperature of if they're like in their fears more, if they're more in their feelings. Because if they're more in their feelings, they'll be willing to open up more, to meet you in person, to do the FaceTime call. But if there's someone who is, like I said, the more avoidance side gets kicked in, you don't want to go, hey, let's hop on a Zoom call, FaceTime call. But at the end of the day, I'm going to be honest with you here. It's all about you. It's all about where you're at, what you can withstand, and what your needs are. That's why the journey with someone who's more fearful avoidant, it takes a lot of persistence. It takes a lot of consistency and patience. And if you don't have that and you're not up for the challenge, you could be doing more harm than good because, and even for yourself, a lot of people say, hey, I think that person needs to get into therapy. But if you stick with that person long enough, you're probably going to be the one that needs therapy. Not only will it be just one person that's traumatized, it'll be two people that are traumatized. And I see a lot of anxious attachment people turn more fearful avoidant after they've been in a dynamic with someone that's more fearful, or even if they've been in a relationship with someone who was more narcissistic. So you need to be concerned about your needs too, because it's not just about how to show up for them. It's also about how to show up for yourself. What happens to a FA when you put them in that position? The saying that goes, it's time to crap or get off the potty. That's what happens. You figure out if you should put more of your time, your energy, and invest more into this person, or if you should just move on. Because think about it. When I work with people who have been in this situation, I've had people who've been in it for over a decade, and they become more resentful, and they become more timid about how to show up for themselves. So essentially, when you get back in contact with someone that's more FA, you want to know exactly where they're at so you don't put yourself back in this dynamic that's going to dysregulate you. Another commenter said, my FA has reached out every 2 to 4 weeks through text and made himself available to talk when I was going through a personal loss. He admitted that he had been in town several times visiting family and was going to reach out and see if I wanted to get lunch, but figured I already moved on. Talking to him when he's vulnerable like that, I feel nothing but compassion and really feel the need to be gentle. It's not until later by myself while I'm trying to figure this out that I get frustrated and upset. Right. So when you're in that situation and you're hearing the story and you're just wanting to be there for them, you become soft, you become gentle, you understand. But it's almost like what they call a Jedi mind trick that later on you start to realize, I told myself I wasn't going to do this. I told myself I was going to set better boundaries for myself. And what happened? I got around them. They were their normal self, and I melted, and I didn't advocate for myself. A lot of the times when I work with clients and we have a set game plan on how they're going to show up, if this happens, then we do this, scenarios and role playing, I see the disappointment that they have when they come back to me and they say, we ended up hanging out for 4 hours, and they feel really ashamed of themselves because they weren't able to stay strong in those situations. So don't put yourself in compromising situations. If you know that going to his house or going to her house and having wine or whatever it is you do is going to make you more vulnerable and make you lower the walls that you've been trying really hard when you're working with your therapist and your coaches to stay strong, then don't put yourself in those situations. Make sure that you go out to a mutual place. If you're in no contact and they reach out, just don't let them have an easy way out. So if you found this video of any value, please like, comment, and share. And always remember, when you go be loved, you'll never have to find it. Namaste.